For millennia, athletic contests have revolved around questions like who can run the fastest, who can lift the most, who can jump the highest. Richard Douglas grew up in Oregon in the United States in the 1960s. In middle school, Richard was a promising high jumper. But between middle school and high school, he experienced a growth spurt to over 6 feet, and he began having trouble coordinating his lanky frame over the bar. In his sophomore year in high school, he failed to complete jumps of 5 feet, which was the qualifying height for most high school meets. Recalling his struggles, he said, "I was the worst guy in our school, the worst guy in our conference, and probably the worst guy in the state of Oregon." Now, we all know promising athletes who fail to live up to their potential for whatever reason, but Richard loved high jumping, and despite his struggles, he kept trying to improve. Fortunately, at the same time, there was a change happening in the sport of high jumping. Now, the essence of the sport remained the same, that is, who can jump the highest over a bar. But up until the 1960s, high jump athletes cleared the bar and landed on hard ground, like sawdust or sand or perhaps a low mat. And as a result, innovation of high jump techniques attempted to ensure that the athletes landed on their feet. Richard's high school was one of the first to install a deep foam matting for a high jump landing. Richard took advantage of this change in environment and compensated for the limitations of his lanky frame by innovating a new approach to overcoming an old obstacle. Like Richard, your company has a variety of limitations. Not only do you have internal limitations, you have external limitations. You have a constantly changing environment that you do business in. Competition is coming and going all the time. Technology is radically shifting and changing, and that's having an impact on your business. The economy, which you basically have no control over, is always impacting you. You also have familiar obstacles that you must overcome in your construction business. And those obstacles include getting work. And then when you get the work, completing the projects on time and under budget. And then chasing the money around and getting paid for what you've done. Now, let's go back to Richard Douglas. Remember, in his sophomore year in high school, he couldn't clear 5 feet in the high jump. He began to experiment with a new approach, jumping over the bar backwards and sort of shoulder and head first. In his junior year, he jumped 6'3", a record for his high school. In his senior year, he broke the state record with a jump of 6'5.5". In 1966, his sophomore year in college, he cleared 6'10", and in 1968, he won the NCAA championship. He was, in other words, the top college high jumper in the nation at 7 feet, 2.5 inches. And finally, in 1968, he qualified for the U.S. Olympic team and won gold in Mexico City, clearing 7'4.25". Of course, Richard Douglas is only part of the high jumper's name that I have been talking to you about. His full name is Richard Douglas Fosbury, or, as he's more commonly known, Dick Fosbury. He pioneered the Fosbury flop, and at the time, it was a unique way of high jumping that revolutionized the sport. And today, over 50 years later, it's still the most used technique by world-class high jumpers. Now, unlike Richard, the high jumper, you don't have years to tinker and experiment and figure out a different way of overcoming the obstacles. You need an efficient method to clearly identify the obstacles you face and tap the creativity and wisdom of your team to come up with ideas for conquering the obstacles and drive your business forward. In today's episode of Construction Genius, you'll learn a step-by-step process for doing exactly that. It's simple, It's powerful, and it works.